Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our home in Venice, California, this is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today you're listening to Spell It Out, Magic, Reflections, and Shadows. Today I'm going to be talking about the concept of purpose. Do we have a purpose? And if so, how do we discover it? But before we get started on this hot topic, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and thank you guys so much for supporting our show. It's really awesome, and we love it. We keep getting new subscribers. It makes us happy. So if you go to YouTube, please do subscribe. And visit our website. We've got lots of great shows coming up in June. We have a lot of our fan favorites back. The first show next week will be Krista's dad, Dr. George Schwimmer, and he will be discussing his experiences doing past life therapy. So I know a lot of you guys are totally into the past life stuff. It should be fascinating, and he's worked at it for decades, so it'll be very interesting to hear what he has to say. We're going to have our good friend Lama Kathy Wesley back, giving us some of her incredible wisdom and insight. And our good friend, Reverend Jim McGrath, will be back, and he's going to be talking about miracles. And so we're going to do a show on some of the miracles of Christ and other Christian miracles, and are they really miracles, and so forth. And so that should also be very fascinating. So please tune in for that. Get all the information on our website, which is sixthsensesociety.com, all spelled out, SIXTH. sixthsensesociety.com. And while you're there, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. Helps to support the show a little bit and makes us happy to get a coffee now and again. So you'll see on the right-hand menu at the bottom where you can click and buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. And it really does help us to cover some of the costs of producing the show and so forth. And hopefully this is going to be our last pandemic episode. And next week we are planning on moving back to our studio at Sunset Masonic Lodge in Santa Monica. So we're excited about that. And it's been nice doing it from home, but we're really looking forward to having more space, and it'll be a lot of fun. So don't want to take up any more time. So we're going to kick it back over to Krista, and take it away, Krista.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Yes, we are looking forward to going back to Sunset Masonic Lodge. So I was thinking about what I wanted to do today to build on the topic of Know Thyself, which I started the year with. And one of the questions often that comes to us as readers, but also one that I had, is the concept of purpose. Do I have, as a person, a purpose in life? Is it a specific purpose? And if so, how do I discover it? So over the years, I have probably wrestled with this idea quite a bit. And I've gone from feeling I definitely have a purpose, but not knowing what that is exactly, to sort of in the middle now. I do think that purpose is part of a healthy and meaningful life. And I think spiritually, I'm not really on the same page as some, at least, of the new age ideas, such as before you are born, you have this contract with yourself, and you have these things you're going to do. To me, that seems a little too simplistic and also unrealistic, because I think the soul grows very organically. But I do think that we are all quite unique, and all you have to do is look at a family and see siblings that will grow up in the same family and often have completely different talents, not always, but often, and certainly different desires. And what is it that causes that to happen? So the first person I wanted to talk about that really turned me on to how I actually, in a way, I agree with his concept of purpose, is from Robert Greene's book, Mastery. And that book is a wonderful book on the concept of mastery. What does it take to become a master? And he basically has done a lot of studies into different masters' lives, as well as interviews of current people that are masters. And he's broken this book down into different segments. In the very beginning of the book, he has really a section about purpose. And I wanted to read this quote because I really love it. And it's under the heading, Discover Your Life Calling, the Life's Tasks. He says, you possess a kind of inner force that seeks to guide you toward your life's tasks, what you are meant to accomplish in the time that you have to live. In childhood, this force was clear to you. It directed you toward activities and subjects that fit your natural inclinations, that sparked a curiosity that was deep and primal. In the intervening years, the force tends to fade in and out as you listen more to parents and peers, to the daily anxieties that wear away at you. This can be the source of your unhappiness, your lack of connection to who you are and what makes you unique. The first move towards mastery is always inward, learning who you really are and reconnecting with that innate force. Knowing it with clarity, you will find your way to the proper career path and everything else will fall into place. It is never too late to start this process. And that is probably one of the best things about that quote is he strongly thinks that you can always start your purpose if you feel like you're not leading a life that is authentic to who you really are. And so that goes back to the beginning show where I first said you have to know yourself, but part of knowing yourself and part of purpose is knowing your interests and what he calls your inclinations. And he gives a really interesting and beautiful example with Charles Darwin in the book, where he talks about how Darwin, as a young boy, he really enjoyed spending time in the woods collecting specimens. He had no idea where this was going to lead. And in fact, he really wasn't doing very well with finding a career path. But fate brought along the beagle, and he got to go and collect specimens for 5 years, and then came back to become a scientist. So he went with it because he knew that's what he loved. And throughout the book, which I really highly recommend, is that he shows examples of how people's inclinations, when they follow them, and they can be more than one inclination, they lead them towards a meaningful and purposeful life. So, in fact, his thoughts in this book are that as a young person, particularly if you have young people have more energy, generally speaking, and more time. And you should be developing any of your interests. It doesn't matter if they go together. It doesn't matter if you know where it's going to lead, but you want to have your toolkit together so that purpose can be developed out of this toolkit. I think in today's age where there's so many kinds of incredible jobs out there that that sometimes I hear about a job I would have never thought of because we live in a different world where you can even almost make up jobs and suit them to your talents and it works. So the idea of having more than one interest is fine, developing them, going deeper with them, and letting them, your interest and your curiosity, just like the Fool in the tarot, leading you forward. And I would say that that's definitely how I found my path to the tarot. I started with having just a great interest in metaphysics, astrology, numerology. To be honest, it never occurred to me at the time to be a reader. I had no thoughts about that, but I simply followed my curiosity, and eventually the path unfolds in front of you. So that's the first thing I wanted to say about purpose. Now, in my mind, and this is my own thoughts about things, there's a difference between a mission and a purpose. I think everyone can have a purpose that's meaningful based on the concept of your own interests and passions. But I really don't think everyone has a mission. And I don't really have a reason for it. It's more of an observation. So for me, mission is sometimes something that the universe puts in a person's path that certainly might be part of that person's character. And it might be part of that person's path in some way. But sometimes these missions don't always have a direct connection right away to what the person is doing. So an example to me of someone with a mission, I would say, would be Joan of Arc. And who would have ever dreamed of a young woman during that time leading these soldiers successfully in a battle? I don't think she did. Now, granted, she was connected to a vision and she was following her spiritual path, but she didn't really, when you think about it, I don't even think she even developed those talents first. She actually had them somehow innate in her. So to me, sometimes people have a mission in life that is uncovered just through living life. And certainly perhaps not everyone embraces the mission. I suppose there can be missions that are turned down that we don't even know about. And I don't think it means that you're more evolved or you're better. I just feel like at some point the universe seems to pick people to do certain things. And if they, answer the call, then they sometimes have a mission that can be quite difficult, actually. I don't know if I'd want to have a mission, if you ask me. So I think there's a difference, at least spiritually and esoterically, between purpose and mission. Now, as I said, to discover your purpose is really not as hard as it sounds. Even as an adult, you can think about what you really enjoy doing and your interests. And most, I don't know, at least several people I've read think that children generally have some ideas of what this is. And certainly they can be discouraged from it, from maybe a parent doesn't want their child to be interested in certain things, or maybe the school or education system doesn't encourage them. But I remember in one of Clarissa Pinkola-Estes' books, as a Jungian therapist, she suggested if you're sort of confused about your interests and who you really are, to go back to about the age of 8 to 9 and see what was going on for you at that time. Because by then, you do have a sense of who you are and some of your interests. And so I thought that was a good exercise to do. So that's one thing you can do. As I talked about in some of the earlier shows, you can certainly look for some of the clues in astrology if you go to someone that tends to have more depth and is willing to, really look at things in a more integrated way. I've recently come to think that the sun sign is probably a little more important to me than I had thought in terms of helping you find a purpose. And I had gone through sort of really thinking, okay, the whole chart's important, the integration of the chart. And then I was doing the workbook by Demetra George and Douglas Block, which I mentioned in other shows. And I came to the part about the sun sign. And she says in there that the sun sign is, I have a little bit more of her quote, it represents the essence of who you know yourself to be, your conscious purpose and identity, the inherent potential you have to work in the here and now. So I've been thinking about that, and it makes some sense because the sun as a concept in astrology is really a reflection of the real sun in the cosmos. And as you know, the sun is a star, and it is the center of our galaxy. And so any planetary body is really meant to be in a relationship to the sun. So you're looking at the relationship the sun has with all these different planetary bodies. And I was thinking how that's really kind of brilliant. And if you don't feel a sense of purpose, if you feel lost or confused, you can sometimes go back into just looking at your sun sign, but perhaps in a more complex way. You look at not only the sign it's in, you look at the house it's in, you look at any planets aspecting it, and you begin to meditate on what your sun needs to shine. What do you need to feel alive and nourished? And that's your spark. That's your life force. And if you ignore that, you do that to your own detriment. And I did feel that was very accurate. And I started spending more time with some of the concepts of my sun sign. And I have felt more revitalized as a result of it. So in a sense, that's a little more, I think, of an organic way of finding your purpose. In astrology, there's also the emphasis on the north and south nodes, which would probably be a good show to do at some point. Having said that, I think the North Node does point to some of your evolution, but I have not personally found it to be necessarily connected to helping me uncover more directly my purpose. And I also have found that I think it's sometimes overemphasized and the South Node is left out too much because a lot of the books I've read seem to think, oh, you've done that from the South Node, you don't need to do it again. But then when you read people like Aleister Crowley, who believes that some of your purpose is continuing from other past lives, you might want to look at the South Node to get some clues as to what talents and skills you naturally have already. Why would I want to throw them out if I had earned them in another lifetime? That never made any sense to me. So there's that sort of concept. So I wanted to also mention, I lost my train of thought there between purpose and astrology. Oh, Jane Roberts. So another really interesting exercise you can do if, let's say you want to, again, focus on what you want to learn and your interest. Jane Roberts in The Nature of Personality suggests that you make a list of everything you've ever been interested in mentally, physically, and it does not matter if you've never done it, if you've done it a lot. And that is, all of those things on the list are tied into who you are and your interests. And the interesting thing is, even if you make that list, say you make it when you're 40, you'll notice that there will be some same things on that list, even if you've not done it, that you're still interested in. And what you might notice too is there's some things that are always missing. So for instance, as much as I admire engineers, I've never wanted to be an engineer. And so I said, well, I've never wanted to be one. So there are things you can sort of say, well, I've never wanted to do that. And according to her idea, basically, you basically take anything from that list and move towards it. And especially if you feel stuck and you think that, you're drifting, just do something on that list, even if it's something very simple and easy to do. So I think that's another great way to find purpose. I do think having purpose in one's life is a very healthy and it's a really effective tool. I think I'm more with Robert Greene that I think it's sort of wired into your DNA. That's why whatever you're interested in, whatever you are passionate about, that is your purpose. Your passion is your purpose. And then there's, of course, things along the path. All of us have it, by the way. All you have to do is read the great biographies. There will be obstacles on the path. That does not mean you have failed or that you're off your purpose. And we'll get into that in a different way, because at that point I want to talk about some ways to help get through obstacles when you are really on your path and you're not feeling like it's getting anywhere. So don't ever think, if you're not sort of where you think you should be or being who you think you should be, that you're off your purpose. You may be exactly where you should be according to your deeper direction. And that's another thing, is purpose is not something gained overnight. And this is one of the problems of modern society, is it's becoming more impatient and there are a lot of distractions. And so it takes away from going deeper into our purpose, going into that solitude that all work requires at times, and also the boredom and the repetition that you really won't be able to develop, who you really are if you don't embrace that. So it's certainly, however, very, I would say, satisfying to have a path of purpose. And I know for me, I do much better when I'm connected more to my own purpose, to who I am, who is unique to the world. No better, no worse. It's just, this is me, and it's very important to stay on that direction and not worry what other people think. And if I'm, making a lot of money from it or notoriety from it, I really don't see that has any relationship to deep purpose in life. So that's a few things I wanted to say about purpose. I wanted to also recommend a book. And I've already mentioned the book I'm going to recommend today. I wanted to do that as part of the show. And it's the book Mastery by Robert Greene. He's the one that's written a lot about power, the 48 laws of power, the 50th law. And I'm kind of going backwards with his books because I started with the 50th Law, then I saw Mastery. Basically, it's a beautiful, really intelligent book. It's something I have read more than once because it's just got so much insight in it. And it is connected to purpose, but it's obviously it's connected to mastery and mastering your purpose in life. So that's the book I'm going to recommend this week. I also wanted to answer a question that was asked of me quite a while ago, and I have forgotten who asked it on our Instagram, which, by the way, on our Instagram, we passed 500 followers. We're really happy about that. And thank you so much for that. So we really appreciate that. But someone had asked me I think it was an astrology program we were doing. They asked me, I must have mentioned that I have a fourth house stellium in my chart. And they wanted to know what it's like to have a stellium in your fourth house in your natal chart. And so I thought I'd sort of respond to that question now. For those of you that don't know what a stellium is, basically it's considered in astrology where you have 3 or more planetary bodies of significance, either in the same sign or the same house. And in my case, I have it's Moon, Venus, Sun in the fourth house in Cancer. So one of the things about having a fourth house stellium in that place is that it's very private. So I did not even want to reply to the question, to tell you the truth. The fourth house in astrology it's basically people that have like a sun in the fourth house. They're born close to midnight. So it's basically the sort of the lowest point in the chart. And so even though it's seen as the house of the home, there are quite a few astrologers I admire that see it as also the deeper unconscious and one of the most, feminine and difficult houses, other than the 12th house, maybe to really define. So having my sun there, which is my essence, I have sort of a midnight sun. It makes me want to dig very deeply into my psyche, into my imagination. I'm not necessarily a homebody, though I have gotten that as I've gotten older. But the idea of wanting to penetrate into the unknown and to explore it and examine it, that has been probably one of the biggest quests I've had through my life. I've done it through journaling. I've done it through understanding my natal chart. I've done it through reading about psychology and thinking about these things. So that's mainly my experience. It makes me want to go inward, deeper, penetrating the psyche, the imagination. I have a very rich inner world. I have a very rich dream world. And I very much enjoy that part of my life, particularly as I've gotten older and I have learned to accept that's part of who I am. So that's my experience. I think that it would be different depending on what kind of planets you have in those the fourth house. So I would say, sort of getting back to our main topic of purpose, to remember first that in order to really find a purpose, one has to know oneself first, and that means getting to know your interests, getting to know who you are, exploring these interests. So in this case, what you would do is don't be afraid to try things, to not see them as an end result. I'm going to take this, course on sign language just to see how I feel about it. And if you start following that path organically, what I have found is your curiosity will take you to the next step. So what's interesting about following your interest is it's not always the first interest that you end up with. And in that if you had not followed that interest, you wouldn't have gone to the next one. So there's an element of really learning to have to trust the process of it not being quite linear in terms of defining a purpose and following a path of purpose. But if you allow yourself to just sort of flow with it and go with it, and then it will lead you to developing more and more of what you want. Now, at the same time, it's true that some people do seem to have a strong inclination to do something from a very young age that is directly connected to their passion. You'll see that often with artists. Certain artists will be painters or musicians, and though I've read some stories about with scientists too, that they're already like inventing things and blowing things up in their garage, and I always thought, wow, those are great parents to let them do that, you know. So I would say that, you know, basically any way in which you can just embrace your interest and follow them will lead you on this path of purpose. And then later on, as I said, we'll talk about some of the obstacles along the way, which if you, again, I do encourage people to read the biographies of people they love, and especially important, significant people in the world that you feel personally have made a difference in the world to you anyway, because you'll be amazed at the kinds of obstacles people have that, you know, you don't really know about, and they're hard. They're really hard. And it gives you sort of a strength to follow your own path and realize it's part of life. An obstacle is going to happen no matter what you do. In fact, I do remember once Jamgon Khantrul Rinpoche, the previous one, saying that if you're going to do something really positive and great in the world, you should expect resistance from the opposite, and that's part of really wanting to do something great in the world. And again, I'm not saying that everyone's going to want to do something great as part of their purpose. That's what's really fascinating, is there are people that ended up doing great things, but they didn't really start off thinking I'm going to be great. What they started off was they followed their curiosity, and they followed that sense of, I want to know more about this. And then they developed the tools to go along the way. Now, also, you know, when I say inclination, it doesn't mean you have to be good at it in the beginning. There's also some really great examples of people that weren't good at all at what they became great at, but they really wanted to do it. So sometimes, yes, we have a natural talent that is connected to our inclination, and sometimes we don't. Or we have a hindrance again, but we really want to pursue something. It's like, you know, a blind person wanting to play music, and they do it. And so don't see it as something that comes easy to you. And in fact, on some level, I think if it only comes easy to you ever, then either you're not going deeper with the purpose, or it's not really, you know, what you're kind of meant to do. I don't think anything is easy in life. You know, it's definitely one of the mythologies that sometimes I feel certain New Age movements or people make it sound like if you know, you're on the right path, everything just opens up to you, and you know that's how it is. And it's not at all how it is. Life is a struggle. Life is difficult. And if it wasn't, it really wouldn't be worth it. But having said that, it isn't, why not struggle with the things that you really want to do in your life? And I will say that when I really started following my interests and really let go of my fear of, you know, needing to pay the rent and do that, it's always been fine. I mean, I've always had support in some ways in order to pursue what I wanted to pursue. And it hasn't necessarily been easy, but I find that the path just keeps going in some ways. And I know during this pandemic, it may seem for some people that it's going to be difficult to pursue what you want. But in fact, it's probably going to be the opposite, because the world is being rethought and remade as we move forward. So in a way, this is probably a great time, if you're not already doing this, to explore what it is that you really do feel you want to do and what your purpose is. And so I hope that that sort of gives you an idea of how I think about purpose. I think it is something that's important to the human existence. And I do hope all of you take the time to continue with your purpose, or to take the time out to look at what it is that you're doing. And remember, purpose will evolve. It will move into other structures. So like in my case, it moved into doing this show. And again, it's not something I had a preconceived idea about. It just organically came out of Michael and I, our interest in tarot and metaphysics, and our friends, and we just said, okay, let's go with this. And so we have been going with it, and we'll see where it goes. So I hope that this will make you think about yourself and your purpose more. I hope that you all stay safe and well during these interesting times. I look forward to talking again next time. In the meantime, continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure, and have a beautiful week.